The case of Anna Kriegel. Geraldine and Patrick Kriegel lived in Ireland. In 2006, they marked their 20th wedding anniversary. The couple shared a strong bond and dreamed of becoming parents. They knew that adopting a child from an orphanage would require a great deal of time and effort, as well as meeting strict criteria, but they remained optimistic. Both had successful careers and were financially secure while waiting for their adoption paperwork to be completed. Eventually, they received news that a 2-year-old girl from Russia was available for adoption. Her name was Anastasia, born on February 18, 2004, in Novokuznetsk. After her birth, she was placed in an orphanage because her biological mother was unable to give her a good life. On August 10, 2006, the family brought the young girl home, marking the date as their family holiday. They chose to keep her name and called her Anna for short. The joyful sound of Anna's laughter filled their home. Anna was deeply loved by her parents. They made continuous efforts to bring happiness into their family. They went ice skating and planned summer travel trips. The family often vacationed in Patrick's hometown of Annecy, France, where they owned a house. Anna made several friends there and eagerly looked forward to the trip every year, as she loved France and was even learning French. However, Anna struggled with learning English, and Patrick supported her so she could communicate better with her classmates. Anna also found it difficult to form close relationships and express her emotions. Her time in the orphanage, where Anna lacked proper care, left her uncomfortable with physical contact. Nevertheless, Geraldine and Patrick helped bridge this emotional gap by loving and supporting Anna unconditionally. Their nurturing home, combined with educational activities, nutritious meals, and sports, provided a solid foundation for Anna's future. During a routine medical checkup, doctors discovered a tumor in Anna's right ear, which caused significant hearing loss in that ear and partial blindness in her right eye. Despite these difficulties, she remained an active and cheerful child. However, her hearing and vision problems affected her learning abilities, making it hard for her to retain information and resulting in poor grades during elementary school. To keep pace with her classmates, Anna sought professional support until the end of 3rd grade. One day, while walking home and listening to her favorite music through her headphones, Anna suddenly encountered 4 boys blocking her path. They mocked her and even pinched her, causing her to run home in tears and tell her mother everything. Concerned, Geraldine and Patrick decided to take action and file a complaint against the boys. To protect Anna, her parents decided to take her to school and pick her up every day, but this made her an easier target for teasing, much to Geraldine's distress, as she felt heartbroken over her daughter's situation. As time went on, Anna began to harm herself as a way of coping with her emotional pain. Her parents grew increasingly worried, fearing that she might take more extreme actions. Geraldine's only wish was for her daughter to find happiness. After some time, Anna began to improve. She made new friends, people she enjoyed having sleepovers with, going for walks, watching movies, and talking to. As Anna's high school years were coming to an end, Geraldine wanted to help her prepare for her upcoming exam on May 13, 2018. They usually spent weekends doing homework together, and even though Geraldine was very busy, he always made time to study with Anna. However, that weekend, they decided to take a break. They turned on the television, made popcorn, and cuddled up while watching a movie. Anna's cousins joined them, and Geraldine ordered pizza. The children played games while the adults relaxed with wine and snacks. The house was filled with laughter and joy, and no one could have anticipated what would happen next. On May 14, 2018, the day began like any other. Geraldine took the train to Dublin while Anna went to school. After lunch, Anna had an appointment with a psychologist. Meanwhile, Patrick, who was already retired, decided to sleep in. Classes ended at 4 p.m., and Anna tried to call her mother, but Geraldine was in an important meeting and could not answer. She sent Anna a message saying she would call her later. When Anna arrived home, she found her father Patrick relaxing in the garden. Patrick was surprised to see Anna returning home with a boy he had never seen before. Anna was clearly excited. She whispered something to the boy, grabbed her favorite sweater, and told her father she would be back soon. Patrick reminded her that she needed to study, which she had forgotten. Patrick watched as they headed toward the park, and that was the last time he saw his daughter. At first, her father was not worried because the park was only a 20-minute walk away. At 5:10 p.m., Geraldine returned home and tried to call Anna, but she did not answer. After a while, she stopped calling, assuming Anna would be home shortly. When Anna still had not returned, Patrick told his wife that Anna had gone to the park with a boy. This was unusual. Geraldine quickly sent Anna a message asking her to come home, but received no response. This silence deeply concerned her parents. Geraldine felt anxious because of past incidents in which her daughter had been mocked due to her illnesses. Worried, Geraldine went to the park but could not find Anna. The parents then began driving around the neighborhood looking for her. Their concern intensified when they realized they knew nothing about the boy Anna had been with. By 9 p.m., they reported Anna missing to the police, emphasizing that she had not answered any calls or messages, which was very unlike her. They also informed the police about the unknown boy. The police quickly located a young man referred to as Boy B, who seemed surprised by their questions. When asked where Anna was, he stated that they had walked together until 5:40 p.m. and then went their separate ways. After this, the police launched a search for Anna, combing the area and reviewing surveillance footage. Patrick and Geraldine, Anna's parents, provided photographs, including one showing her wearing the black sweatshirt she had on when she left that evening. While reviewing video footage that showed Boy B and Anna in the park around 5 p.m., police noticed that at 5:14 p.m. the two exited the park through a different entrance, after which Anna appeared to vanish without a trace. The investigation intensified when a witness reported seeing the pair in the park. The footage later showed Boy B walking alone in the park at 5:49 p.m. When questioned further by police, Boy B revealed that he had been with a friend known as Boy A, who had feelings for Anna, and that he had arranged their meeting. With this new information, police intensified their search, sharing details about Anna's disappearance on social media and in local newspapers. At the same time, the search for Boy A began. His backpack was found, and surveillance cameras captured him entering and leaving the park, but there was a significant period during which he was not seen. Some people believed Anna might have run away, but that theory was quickly dismissed. To uncover what had happened, police carefully reconstructed the events in the park that day, closely examining the actions of Boy B and Boy A in the presence of their parents. The boys' interactions raised suspicions among investigators, leading to them being questioned separately. Boy B's account remained consistent, but Boy A's version of events differed. He said he was surprised when Boy B asked him to come along, knowing that Anna had feelings for him. During questioning, Boy A described a disturbing incident in which two unknown men attacked them, resulting in a struggle during which he injured one of the attackers. He showed police his injuries, including scratches and cuts on his face, suggesting that the unknown men could be connected to Anna's disappearance. As a result, police requested descriptions of the alleged attackers and collected the boys' belongings for DNA analysis. As the investigation progressed, specialized search units, including divers and rescue teams, were deployed to examine nearby bodies of water. A total of 60 individuals, including volunteers and Anna's family, assisted in the search for her. Her disappearance drew intense media attention. Near the park stood an old, abandoned farmhouse known as Glenwood. An eyewitness reported seeing several young people entering it, which prompted police to investigate. The farmhouse had 2 stories and covered 42 hectares of land, but it was severely neglected, with many roofs and walls collapsed. It was unclear why police had not searched the location earlier. They began their efforts in the park and then proceeded toward the farmhouse, carefully examining both the building and the surrounding fields. Inside, the structure was dark and deserted. One officer noticed a powerful, unpleasant odor filling the space. The officers soon discovered the body of a female, lying among clothing and a shattered phone. Nearby were traces of blood, along with a brick and a large tree branch. Based on the clothing, the body was identified as Anna. She had suffered multiple injuries, and her neck was bound with duct tape. Her body lay amid broken bottles and debris. The tragedy deeply devastated Geraldine and Patrick, as losing their cherished daughter brought unbearable grief. The entire city learned of the events, leaving many residents stunned. The farmhouse, once a place where children played safely, had become the scene of a horrific crime. On May 18, 2018, hundreds of people attended Anna Kriegel's funeral, wearing red and white armbands in her honor. The Eiffel Tower symbolized her love for her hometown, while her father paid tribute to her birthplace by wearing the Russian flag and carrying a doll. An autopsy revealed that Anna had sustained around a dozen injuries, with numerous bruises and cuts concentrated on her head, face, and neck. The cause of death was determined to be blunt force trauma to the head, and asphyxiation indicated she had been raped. Semen evidence was found at the scene. Her death occurred between 5:25 and 5:54 p.m., shortly after she left the park. At the building's entrance, she was struck with a heavy stick and then hit with a brick, leaving blood splattered on the wall. On May 24th, police gathered all available evidence and arrested two teenagers, Boy B and Boy A, who had been the last people seen with Anna. The community was shocked that both were suspected of her murder. In Boy A's backpack, police found a zombie mask stained with Anna's blood, along with gloves and knee pads. Semen recovered from the crime scene matched Boy A's DNA, and Anna's blood was also found on his shoes and clothing. Despite the strong evidence against Boy A, no DNA linked Boy B to the crime. During questioning, Boy B admitted that he saw Anna enter an abandoned house with Boy A, but claimed he did not know what Boy A intended to do. Boy B said he wanted to go inside, but became frightened when he heard screams coming from the entrance. He then saw Boy A tearing Anna's clothes and realized the danger. Yet Boy B did not intervene, even though Anna's life depended on his actions. Both boys were released on bail while awaiting trial, which angered many local residents. People grew increasingly fearful for their safety, particularly because the boys' identities were not disclosed. Both teenagers came from respected and successful families and had no prior criminal records or known mental health issues, which surprised the community. Their case hearing took place on April 30th, 2019. It was a closed session attended only by the parents of the two boys. The prosecutor stated that Boy B lured Anna from her home by claiming she would meet Boy A, someone she liked. Instead, Boy B brought her to an abandoned house where she was raped. The jury trial began on June 12, 2019, and 5 days later, Boy A was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of review after 12 years. Boy B was also convicted in connection with Anna's death despite the lack of sufficient physical evidence and received a 15-year sentence, eligible for review after 8 years. By law, their identities must remain protected, and if released, they will be given new identities. However, Anna's parents suffered the greatest loss. Geraldine stated that life without Anna had lost its meaning. Patrick died on June 19, 2022, weighed down by guilt for allowing his daughter to leave with a stranger that day. Moving on to the next case. The case of Ariel Castro. The monster from Cleveland and his captives is a striking example of brutal criminals hiding behind a facade of normalcy. Maniacs like Castro often appear as good, law-abiding citizens, fooling neighbors, friends, colleagues, and even close relatives who remain unaware of their double lives. Unlike many, Ariel Castro was never a model family man or worker. He was a tyrant to his wife, who chose to remain silent about her suffering. Thus, people around them sincerely viewed Ariel as a good-natured, friendly, and helpful neighbor. This perception shattered in the spring of 2013 when the world learned about the Cleveland monster who had kept 3 girls captive in his home for 10 years. The revelation shook the country, particularly shocking the local residents, as the missing girls were from the same neighborhood and trusted Castro enough to accept rides from him. Remarkably, Castro even participated in the search efforts for his victims, becoming a volunteer, yet no one suspected him. Let us delve into how this criminal managed to stay hidden in plain sight, continue kidnapping girls, and evade detection. Ariel Rodriguez Castro was born on July 10, 1960, in Yauco, Puerto Rico, as the third of 4 children in a poor family. His parents, Liliana Rodriguez and Pedro Castro, constantly fought and eventually divorced before Ariel started school, leaving his mother to care for him and his siblings O'Neill, Pedro, and Bonita. Struggling to make ends meet, the family moved to Reading, Pennsylvania, in southeastern USA. However, they soon moved to the neighboring state of Ohio, finally settling in Cleveland, a city that at the time welcomed migrants from Latin American countries. Pedro Castro also moved to Cleveland with his new wife and their joint children, settling nearby so the children from his first marriage could freely communicate with their father, which Liliana never forbade. Although their father willingly contacted his older children, he never helped them financially. Liliana later remarried, giving Ariel 4 more siblings. Ariel attended Lincoln West High School in Cleveland, graduating in 1978. He studied music and regularly attended church with his family, presenting as a model Christian, but was a domestic tyrant. In his teens, Ariel met a girl named Grimilda Figueroa, whose family lived across the street. They attended the same school, quickly became friends, and later developed a romantic relationship. For a long time, they lived with their parents because they could not afford their own place. In the early 1990s, after saving enough money, the couple moved into a house on Seymour Avenue in southwest Cleveland. This two-story building, erected in 1890 and later reconstructed, had 4 bedrooms, a dining room, 1 bathroom, and a large unfinished basement. According to Grimilda's sister, Alida Caballo, Grimilda complained that her life became a nightmare after moving into the new house. Ariel regularly abused her, both physically and emotionally. Grimilda believed things would improve after marriage and children, but the abuse worsened. She hid bruises and abrasions under her clothes, blaming visible injuries on clumsiness. In 1993, Ariel beat Grimilda so severely that she needed medical attention. Grimilda suffered fractured ribs, a broken nose, and broken arms after being pushed down the stairs by her husband. Despite her severe injuries, she refused to file a police report, and the incident was hushed up. After receiving medical attention, she returned to her abusive husband. Ariel remained quiet for a while, fearing police attention, but soon realized he could get away with it and continued to beat his wife. In the mid-1990s, he inflicted a head injury that caused a blood clot and an inoperable tumor. Ariel was arrested but released a day later as Grimilda did not press charges and even requested his release. By the late 1990s, Grimilda, tired of the abuse, filed for divorce, secured custody of their 4 children, Arlene, Antonio, Angie, and Amelia, and moved out. Her nightmare continued as her ex-husband pursued, blackmailed, and threatened her. Grimilda sought a restraining order, which was issued 3 times but revoked each time. She passed away in late April 2012 from complications related to the brain tumor. By then, her children were grown and independent but maintained a warm relationship with their father. In the early 2000s, Ariel lived alone on Seymour Avenue, worked as a school bus driver, played guitar at city festivals, and was known as a good-natured, hospitable neighbor. Nevertheless, there were oddities in Castro's behavior that went unnoticed. For instance, he was prosecuted several times for traffic violations, including speeding and making dangerous U-turns while driving a school bus. These infractions led to fines and a suspension, culminating in his firing in early 2013 after a maneuver endangered his passengers. Ariel frequently changed musical groups due to tardiness and disrupting rehearsals and concerts. After separating from his wife, he never invited anyone inside his house, though he regularly hosted backyard barbecues. His strangeness did not raise concern. He was seen as eccentric but harmless. No one could have guessed the danger behind his friendly facade. His first victim was Michelle Knight. On August 23, 2002, he decided to kidnap and imprison her. Michelle, born on April 23, 1981, in Cleveland, had a troubled youth, often ran away from home, and had a police record. She became a mother early but lost custody of her son, who was placed in a shelter. On that fateful day, she was on her way to court to regain custody of her 2-year-old. Ariel, whom she knew as her neighbor and a school bus driver, offered her a ride. He mentioned having puppies at home and invited her to help find them homes. Trusting him, Michelle agreed. But upon entering his house, the kind man turned into a monster. He severely beat and assaulted her, then chained her in the basement. For days, he starved her, deprived her of water, and repeatedly abused her. She was unable to move and begged for her release, promising silence. When Michelle's mother reported her missing, the police did not prioritize her case. Years later, after the terrible truth came to light, police officers admitted that Michelle Knight's case was not a priority and limited resources were allocated to the investigation. Firstly, Knight was an adult. Secondly, she had previously left home multiple times. Thirdly, she had legal issues. Most importantly, authorities believed she was avoiding court proceedings related to her son's custody. Michelle's relatives tried to find her through their own efforts, involving neighbors, friends, and anyone concerned. At one point, Ariel Castro even helped post flyers with Michelle's photo around the city, all while she remained a prisoner in his basement. The second victim was Amanda Berry. Castro, convinced he was beyond suspicion, decided to kidnap again in spring 2003. Amanda, born on April 22, 1986, was about to celebrate her 17th birthday but mysteriously disappeared on April 21, 2003. She was working as a waitress and called home after her shift, promising to be there soon. However, Amanda never arrived, and neither did she appear in the following days, months, or years. As Amanda left the restaurant and headed for the bus stop, Ariel drove up with a seemingly harmless offer of a ride home. Since she had been in the same class as his son for several years, she trusted him and accepted. On the way, he deceived her into entering his house, where he brutally beat her and dragged her to the basement, where Michelle had been held captive for months. Amanda faced the same horrific fate, beaten and starved for several days. This time, he chose 14-year-old Gina de Jesus, who was in the same class as his daughter Arlene and was her best friend. On April 2, 2004, the two girls walked out of school together, talked for a while, and then each went to their homes. On the corner of West 105th Street, Gina met Ariel, who promised to take her home. She knew him since childhood, and he was her best friend's father. So without hesitation, she got into his car immediately. Even though it was daytime and no one witnessed the kidnapping, the streets were empty. When it became known that Gina was missing, there was no warning to Amanda, making her parents angry. The story aired on the Fox television show America's Most Wanted, rerun 2 more times in 2005 and 2006. The disappearance was linked to Amanda's kidnapping a year earlier in September. Despite this, Castro remained unsuspected. He voluntarily participated in the search for the missing girls. He treated Gina like the other victims, keeping them imprisoned in his home. Although a passerby saw a middle-aged Hispanic man and a sketch resembling Castro was drawn, he was never a suspect. For over 10 years, he regularly beat, abused, and starved his victims to mentally break them down, punishing any disobedience or escape attempts to prevent thoughts of running away or death. Michelle, the first and oldest victim, suffered the most, undergoing public beatings to intimidate others. Finally, he moved them from the dark basement to a second-floor room with a view of the backyard. Knight recalls that she became pregnant by her abuser at least 5 times during her incarceration. However, each time it became evident that Ariel terminated the pregnancy in the most brutal manner. He starved the girl and kicked her in the stomach until she miscarried. After one of these tortures, she almost died due to severe bleeding. But even then, the kidnapper remained indifferent and did not allow calling an ambulance. The girls were allowed to take a shower no more than once a week, and that only as a reward for good behavior. Instead of a toilet, they had a garden bucket, which Castro very rarely and reluctantly emptied. The criminal fed the captives no more than once a day, but continued to beat and abuse them regularly. One day he gave the girls a puppy, but a week later he brutally killed the dog in front of them as punishment for Michelle's disobedience. Gina, during the years of confinement, was never pregnant. But Amanda, in 2006, realized that she was expecting a child and with horror, imagined how Ariel would beat her to provoke a miscarriage. This time, however, the man was even pleased about it, allowed her to carry the baby, and bought an inflatable pool specifically for childbirth. In December 2006, Amanda gave birth to a daughter, who was named Jocelyn. The child was born weak but survived. The appearance of the baby closely resembled the girls, who were now immersed in caring for her and a little abstracted from the situation in which they were. In addition, Castro softened considerably after the birth of his daughter and began to pamper the captives with small gifts, and sometimes allowed them to go out with the child for walks in the courtyard, but always under his strict supervision. As Jocelyn grew older, Ariel even sometimes took her to visit her mother, to whom he told her that she was his daughter born out of wedlock. The girl developed appropriately for her age. She articulated herself adeptly, a skill instilled by her mother's tutelage in literacy and numeracy. Outwardly, the child bore the hallmarks of robust health, appearing well-nourished and impeccably groomed. Despite enduring years of captivity under the unyielding control of their tormentor, the girls clung steadfastly to the flickering flame of hope for freedom. Infrequent attempts at escape were made, though each endeavor exacted a heavy toll upon them. Cruel and confident in his ability to preempt their every move, Ariel faltered fatally on May 6, 2013. Amanda saw the fleeting chance when an unlocked door beckoned, frantically alerting a passing neighbor by pounding and shrieking at a window. Though initially perplexed, the neighbor's intuition was roused, prompting swift action and summoning law enforcement to the scene. Amanda divulged her identity and unmasked the presence of 2 other captives, Michelle and Gina. After enduring a decade of captivity, All three were emancipated and promptly hospitalized. While Amanda and Gina exhibited no discernible health concerns, Michelle bore the heavy burden of severe physical and psychological trauma. Deafness plagued one ear, vision was severely impaired, and a litany of untreated fractures necessitated extensive reconstructive surgery. Furthermore, the scourge of abuse-induced complications left her forever robbed of the chance of motherhood. Suspicions of complicity led to the detention of his siblings, O'Neill and Pedro, both frequent visitors to his domain. In due course, the men were swiftly released. On the other hand, Castro faced a litany of charges, including kidnapping, abuse, assault, forced imprisonment, and the heinous act of terminating 5 unborn lives. While the legal ramifications of these charges could have sentenced him to life behind bars, the prosecution aimed for the ultimate punishment, the death penalty, branding Castro as the Cleveland Monster. However, a surprising twist unfolded as Castro opted to collaborate with the investigation, confessing his guilt and recounting the harrowing events in exchange for a commutation of the death penalty to life imprisonment. In his chilling narratives, he meticulously detailed the days of abduction and the subsequent torment inflicted upon his victims, all the while deflecting responsibility onto the very individuals he subjected to such horrors. August 1, 2013, marked the culmination of legal proceedings, with Castro sentenced to spend the remainder of his days incarcerated without the possibility of parole. Yet, his parting words echoed with a mix of remorse and denial as he tendered an apology to his victims, claiming affliction rather than culpability, and casting blame upon law enforcement for their purported ineptitude in failing to uncover the atrocities transpiring right under their noses. Castro's residence met its end on August 7, 2013, reduced to rubble in a symbolic act of closure. The solemn occasion was attended solely by the kin of Michelle Knight and Gina De Jesus, with other participants of the nightmarish ordeal choosing to abstain, unwilling to revisit the site that had served as the backdrop for their unimaginable anguish. Nevertheless, amidst the rubble emerged a glimmer of hope, as on July 9, 2013, Knight, Barry, and De Jesus released a joint video expressing profound gratitude to the public for their unwavering support throughout their journey toward reclaiming their lives. It was their only joint statement, after which, despite the years spent together in confinement, the girls chose never to speak to each other again. The maniac was transferred to a correctional center in Orient, Ohio, after his conviction and placed under special supervision. But on September 3, 2013, just a month after he began serving his life sentence, the Cleveland Monster was found hanging from a sheet in his prison cell. All attempts to revive him were unsuccessful. He was 53 years old at the time of his death. Michelle Knight, after her release, preferred to change her name and place of residence. She did not give interviews, but a few years later published a book in which she recounted all the horrors she had experienced in the Castro home. Her child was adopted after his mother disappeared. The woman later tracked down his adoptive parents, but it is not known whether she was able to establish contact with her now-adult son. Barry and De Jesus received diplomas from John Marshall High School in 2015 because they never had time to graduate. Gina later volunteered on the Amber Alert Committee, and Barry joined Fox affiliate WJW in Cleveland in 2017, where she hosts a missing persons column. Castro family members disowned Ariel, condemned his actions, and apologized to his victims and their families. The perpetrator's eldest daughter, Amelia, is now serving a 25-year prison sentence for assault and attempting to take a man's life. His youngest daughter, Arlene, apologized to former best friend Gina for the way her father treated her. Castro's son, Antonio, said he had been to his father's house and saw that some rooms were locked and inaccessible, but his parent explained it was because he was saving money on heating. In 2018, Michelle published a book titled Life After Darkness, Finding Healing and Happiness After the Cleveland Kidnappings. De Jesus also wrote a book of memoirs titled Hope, a memoir of survival in Cleveland. There have also been numerous documentary projects and 2 feature films about those horrific events. Prisoners of Cleveland, which was released in 2015, and Kidnapped in Cleveland, which was released in 2021. Ariel Castro's case is one of the most horrifying cases in American criminal history. Castro was convicted of kidnapping, holding, and sexually abusing 3 women for more than a decade in his home. Castro kidnapped Amanda Barry, Gina De Jesus, and Michelle Knight at his home in the Tremont section of Cleveland. He kept them in terrible conditions, imprisoned in small rooms, and subjected them to physical and mental torture. Finally, they managed to escape captivity by banging on the door and calling for help. Amanda and the baby girl she gave birth to in captivity were rescued, along with De Jesus and Knight. When the police arrived, they discovered the brutal tragedy that Castro had caused. Castro was later arrested and convicted of a series of crimes, including rape, illegal imprisonment, and unresolved murder. He received a sentence of life in prison plus 1,000 years. However, he committed suicide in prison in September 2013, just 2 months after his arrest. This case caused a stir and sparked special interest in the issues of domestic violence and human rights protection. Moving on to the next case. The case of Ekaterina Bauman. Ekaterina Balgova Bauman was born on May 13, 1989, in Leningrad, now St. Petersburg, one of the largest cities in Russia. In 2009, at the age of 20, she went on vacation with her family and met Walter Bauman, a German 13 years her senior. Walter spoke fluent Russian because he was born in Kazakhstan, a country that was part of the Soviet Union until 1991. Walter had a successful career in Germany and earned a substantial income, but his personal life was troubled. He was always searching for the ideal woman, yet he did not meet the standards of a perfect man himself. He still lived with his parents, paid little attention to his appearance, dressed sloppily, and generally failed to make a good impression on others. He often met women online, primarily Russian women. After conversing with a girl for a long time, he decided to travel to Russia to meet her. However, the meeting did not go as planned, and she stopped contacting him. After meeting Ekaterina, he went on a romantic vacation with her in Turkey. His friends were surprised because Ekaterina seemed too beautiful for him. Their relationship began like many other couples. After the vacation, they continued to communicate via social networks and phone calls while Ekaterina returned to Russia and Walter returned to Germany. He often told his friends about her kindness and beauty, the long conversations they shared, and the love letters they exchanged. Walter also frequently traveled to St. Petersburg to visit Ekaterina, despite the expense of these trips. In her second year at university in St. Petersburg, Walter helped Ekaterina transfer to the University of Hamburg, Germany, in 2010. In Bremerhaven, a port city on the North Sea, she was known as an intelligent, charming, and cheerful young woman. She remained in touch with her family in Russia and continued her studies in business administration in Germany. Ekaterina enjoyed jogging, practicing yoga, and often sought quiet places. A few months later, Ekaterina and Walter married. Alexander, Walter's friend and wedding photographer, described their wedding as extremely lavish. He commented that Ekaterina was the most beautiful and happiest bride he had ever seen. The wedding ceremony took place at a lighthouse, after which they traveled in a large white carriage, something unusual in Germany. Notably, the wedding had very few guests and ended early. The wedding photograph of Walter and Ekaterina shows a happy couple. Walter appears to support his young wife, while Ekaterina gently embraces her husband with a radiant smile. They seem to have found the perfect match in one another. At first, their married life appeared like a fairy tale. However, instead of moving into a luxurious home, the newlyweds moved in with Walter's parents. This was when Ekaterina began to face her first difficulties since arriving in Germany. Living with her in-laws was not easy, and the fairy tale gradually unraveled. Walter's mother, Ludmila Bauman, was born and raised in Kazakhstan, where she spent the first 38 years of her life. An excellent student, she advanced through many career stages, from chemical technology assistant to chemical engineer, and finally to secondary school teacher. Ludmila married at the age of 18 and gave birth to her only son, who became the most important person in her life. The Bauman family had German roots, which prompted their emigration from Kazakhstan to Germany. They settled in Bremerhaven, where Ludmila worked for many years at the Institute of Oceanography, studying global climate change. She held a good position there, regularly went to sea, and participated in approximately 25 expeditions, including trips to the Arctic. Her immigration story became an inspiration for many immigrants in Germany. Because of this, a 1-meter-long portrait of her is displayed alongside 30 other portraits on the facade of the Migration Center in Bremerhaven. Ludmila struggles to accept that her son Walter is an adult. Now 30 years old, she frequently calls him when he is out, constantly asking when he will return home, where he is, and who he is with. As Walter is an only child, Ludmila finds it difficult to maintain the necessary distance and consistently tries to control his life. Ekaterina faced constant judgment from her mother-in-law, Ludmila, but continued to try to please her in every way. Ludmila frequently interfered in her son's married life and criticized Ekaterina, claiming she was a poor wife. Although Ekaterina attempted to adjust to this attitude, her efforts were unsuccessful. When going out, she dressed elegantly to avoid criticism. Otherwise, she endured her mother-in-law's remarks about her indecent clothing. Walter worked at a port and earned a salary of approximately 4,000 euros per month. He often worked on weekends and holidays because of the higher pay. Although not a workaholic, Walter was frugal and saved most of his income. In 2017, when Ekaterina was pregnant, Walter decided to use part of his savings to buy a house. He spent considerable time searching for an affordable home. Ekaterina hoped the move would improve their relationship, but it did not. Ludmila continued to visit regularly and interfere in her son's life. During the period when Ekaterina gave birth to their daughter, her relationship with Walter became even more strained. After the birth, Walter became stricter and more controlling of his wife. He spoke to her disrespectfully, did not allow her to learn to drive, and forbade her from speaking German to their daughter, insisting that the child know only Russian. Ekaterina could not understand the reasons behind her husband's changing behavior. Walter became more irritable, jealous, and controlling than before. His behavior grew unpredictable, and he could explode over trivial matters. The relationship between Walter and Ekaterina deteriorated further. Walter began to use violence against his wife. Authorities became aware of the domestic violence in late 2019, but the case was quickly closed after claiming they had reconciled. Arguments continued, even in front of their children. Walter secretly filmed and photographed their disputes, and even attempted to have someone hack his wife's phone, though the request was refused. He accused Ekaterina of being a bad mother and mentally unstable. Meanwhile, Ekaterina believed Walter no longer cared about her. In the fall of 2020, she sought help from a domestic violence support center, as she could no longer live in a state of stress and fear. After Ekaterina and her daughter left, Walter tried to convince them to return, promising change, admitting his mistakes, and claiming he could not live without his wife and child. Ekaterina eventually forgave him and returned home with her daughter. However, the quarrels persisted. Whenever he realized he was wrong, Walter would give gifts or organize family trips. He also began to change his attitude, not only toward his wife but toward his daughter. Nevertheless, Walter's control over his daughter remained excessive. He always wanted her within sight at home and never allowed her to go out alone, even though she was only 3 years old. Walter reduced his working hours by half to take care of his daughter, take her to school, cook, and have her sleep in the same room as his parents. Acquaintances described Walter as manipulative, stingy, and primarily motivated by money. He often appeared anxious and impatient. Ekaterina frequently visited her family in Russia with Walter, who feared she would stay there and prevent him from seeing their daughter. As her husband's violence escalated, Ekaterina began to consider divorce. However, she discovered that all her personal papers had disappeared. Walter had taken them to his mother's house. One day, when Ludmila came to visit, Ekaterina and Walter argued, and she was thrown out of the house. She called the police, and the situation was resolved. On another occasion, Ekaterina and Walter had a serious argument before taking their daughter to kindergarten. The situation became so severe that the school administration reported it to the Youth Support Service. Subsequently, the family began receiving child education support. For 6 weeks, a family crisis counselor monitored the child's situation and concluded that it was too dangerous to leave her with her parents. Ekaterina remained with her husband only for the sake of her daughter, but could not return to Russia. To take her child out of Germany, she needed Walter's consent, proving that he did not object. In August 2021, Ekaterina took her daughter away for the second time and went to a women's crisis center. She informed authorities that her husband was planning to commit suicide. The social service agency recommended placing the 5-year-old girl in an orphanage. A psychologist from the youth service assessed the situation as very serious. Although Ekaterina agreed to let the youth service place her daughter in an orphanage, Walter and his mother opposed the decision. After Ekaterina and Walter divorced, the child lived alternately with both parents, some days with her father and the rest with her mother in a women's shelter. Ekaterina increasingly wished to return to Russia. Walter did not stop her, but set the condition that their daughter remain in Germany. So Ekaterina went to St. Petersburg alone in early 2021 and again in early 2022. During her stay in Russia, she met a pilot from Siberia whom she had encountered online. After returning to Germany in mid-January 2022, Ekaterina maintained daily contact with the pilot. During their relationship, they exchanged numerous affectionate messages. However, just a few weeks after returning to Germany, on February 4, 2022, Ekaterina abruptly cut off contact with her family and her new lover. She took only an empty suitcase and 13,000 euros from her husband's hidden money and fled. Ekaterina left behind her phone, keys, clothes, and most importantly, her 5-year-old daughter. This information was provided by Walter to the police on February 6, 2022, after Ekaterina's parents had been unable to contact her for 2 days and had asked German authorities to check on her. Police searched the Walters' home 4 days after Ekaterina was reported missing. By that time, Walter had repainted the living room floor, replaced the sofa, and purchased a large amount of cleaning supplies. Notably, footage from the home's camera had disappeared. The search lasted 3 hours. A police dog was led through the garage and home, showing a mild but unclear response in the garage. The initial search found no evidence inside the house or garage. However, police seized a knife and an electric shock device from a garbage truck as evidence. Authorities noted that Walter appeared unconcerned about his wife's disappearance, but was worried about custody of their 5-year-old daughter if Ekaterina did not return. The search for Ekaterina continued for several days without success. She had seemingly vanished without a trace. Police stated that it was unlikely that a young mother would leave her daughter, personal papers, and phone behind to flee abroad. They questioned Walter's account that Ekaterina had fled with only an empty suitcase. Her mysterious disappearance caused concern throughout the city and surrounding areas. On March 1, 2022, 25 days after Ekaterina went missing, a pedestrian walking along the Weser River discovered a strange suitcase washed up on the shore. Upon opening it, he was horrified to find the remains of a woman wrapped in a garbage bag. Not all of the body was present in the suitcase. Some parts were missing. The victim was identified as 32-year-old Ekaterina Baumann. In a grim coincidence, the suitcase was found near the lighthouse where she had held her wedding. The suitcase washing ashore was considered a stroke of luck for the investigation. Experts noted that if it had drifted into the North Sea, Ekaterina's body might have been lost forever. This discovery ended any hope of a happy resolution to her mysterious disappearance. Walter Baumann was arrested as the sole suspect in the case. After the discovery of the body, police conducted a second search of the Baumann family home. This search lasted several days and involved forensic experts. During the investigation, authorities found a bottle of a strong sedative, which was also detected in Ekaterina's blood. Police additionally recovered disposable gloves, aluminum foil, tape, a large number of garbage bags and detergent, containers of acetic acid, solvents, bleach, suitcase keys, and the pink scarf Ekaterina had worn around her neck in her last selfie. Investigators noted that very few of Ekaterina's personal belongings remained. Most of her clothes had been discarded. Her wedding photo, a cherished memento, was found hidden behind the piano. The white coat she wore in her final selfie was discovered in a trash can at the workplace of Ludmila Baumann, Walter's mother. During his detention, Walter frequently wrote letters to his mother, expressing love and referring to her as "my son's mother." He repeatedly begged for her assistance with urgent words such as, "Please help us. You can save us. I only hope for the future in you. Please save me." The true significance of these words was only revealed 8 months later. The last day of Ekaterina's life was Friday, February 4, 2022, at 4:30 p.m. She wore a light-colored jacket and a yellow skirt and walked for approximately 10 minutes. This action was captured on a neighbor's security camera. That evening, the family had a dinner of tuna, halibut, mashed potatoes, and olives, accompanied by a bottle of wine. According to Walter, Ekaterina drank only 1 glass of wine, while he consumed the rest. He claimed this was why he went to bed at 8 p.m. Court records indicate that Ekaterina's phone lost connection to the network at 7:41 p.m. Then, at 8:25 p.m., she made a video call to her new boyfriend from her computer. She was in good spirits and promised to call back after putting the children to bed. However, she did not call him or anyone else that evening. 2 hours later, the Russian pilot texted her good night, but the message remained unread. A forensic examination determined that Ekaterina had died roughly 2 hours after dinner. This was confirmed by an analysis of her stomach contents. Forensic experts found traces of strong sedatives and alcohol in her blood. Her hyoid bone was broken, so the cause of death was determined to be strangulation. Experts also noted that all other injuries to the body were inflicted with very sharp instruments. The next morning, Walter opened the car door at 7:22 a.m. The car left at 10:20 a.m. and returned at 4:49 p.m. 3 days later, Walter called his wife, apparently to support the narrative that she had left voluntarily. He also sent a text asking, "Where are you, Ekaterina?" A message clearly intended to stage the scene. Before February 4th, Walter and his mother had been texting regularly via WhatsApp. However, after that day, their communications abruptly stopped, which was highly unusual. In mid-February, Walter took the car to a car care center and requested a thorough cleaning of the entire interior. On August 26, 2022, Walter's trial began. Prosecutors accused him of putting a sedative in Ekaterina's drink and strangling her while she slept. They claim Walter had premeditated the disposal of the body. The alleged motive was his fear of losing custody of his daughter in the event of divorce, combined with concerns about financial loss. Investigators released new results from Ekaterina's case. They found numerous bloodstains in the garage where Walter had attempted to remove traces, following online instructions. Specifically, blood was found in multiple locations, including under shelves, on the floor, on the stairs, and in the joints. Additional bloodstains appeared on the carpet in the husband's trunk. Despite thorough cleaning, experts from the Institute of Forensic Medicine were able to identify all of the stains as Ekaterina's blood. Walter's phone and computer were seized, providing answers to many questions. Shortly before the tragedy, he had made search queries such as, how to avoid being fined for taking someone's life? What kind of acid can dissolve flesh? How many liters of acid are needed to fill a bathtub? How to read someone else's WhatsApp messages? How long does it take to die from sedatives? And can one be convicted without evidence in Germany? Between December 2021 and the end of February 2022, Walter made approximately 500 internet searches, suggesting careful premeditation of the crime. On the day of Ekaterina's disappearance, he searched electroshock machine twice on Google. Forensic experts later discovered traces of electric shock on Ekaterina's body, leading investigators to suspect Walter used a device to check if she was still alive. At trial, Walter wore a wedding ring and identified himself as a widower. He remained silent throughout the 2-month trial and did not respond to the allegations. During testimony, he often covered his ears as if disassociating from the proceedings. Walter only showed strong emotion when he saw his mother in the courtroom. He cried while she was questioned, staring at her with his hands clasped as if in prayer. In a letter, he begged his mother, "Get me out of here." It appears she agreed to help him. Ludmila Baumann confessed in her testimony that she was the one who killed Ekaterina, not her son. She told the court that in the middle of the night, she went to her son and daughter-in-law's house after receiving a call asking her to babysit her granddaughter. When she arrived, she found Ekaterina sleeping on the couch. She attempted to wake her by shaking her. Ekaterina awoke and punched her in the face. A fight ensued, during which Ludmila strangled her daughter-in-law. Ludmila also admitted that she was the one who disposed of Ekaterina's body afterward. She concluded her testimony by saying that she loved Ekaterina like her own daughter and did not want this to happen. The question remains, did Ludmila really commit the crime, or was she merely trying to protect her son? The close relationship between mother and daughter-in-law is documented through 1,699 pages of WhatsApp chat records. Despite incriminating herself, Ludmila remained free. The jury and prosecutors did not believe her testimony, thinking she was attempting to shield her son. Ludmila's lawyer requested her arrest, while Walter's lawyer requested his release. In the end, the mother was freed, but her son remained in prison. Ludmila did not give up and wrote a letter to the court detailing what she did with the body. She insisted that her son was innocent and wanted to be charged, but the court did not believe her. Ludmila revealed the location of the missing body parts, which led the police to find another bag containing them exactly where she had indicated. Her pedometer showed that at 12:40 a.m., she had walked 220 yards. A camera recorded a person walking past Walter and Ekaterina's house. Walter's father's phone was active at the time, and he drove Ludmila to her son's house, but later claimed he had been sleeping. Experts determined that Ekaterina was already dead, which meant Ludmila's account was false. A strange detail emerged. Ludmila arrived at her son's house after Ekaterina had died and remained present during the body disposal process. She helped clean up, concealed evidence, and acted as an accomplice to her son. However, German law did not charge or arrest Ludmila, as the court focused its suspicions on Walter. He remained silent until reciting a lengthy statement about his life and his love for Ekaterina, citing her emotional issues as the cause of their conflicts. Despite having 230 sheets of paper, he only briefly addressed the night that changed everything. He claimed he was asleep when his mother killed his wife and dragged her into the garage. Walter blamed his mother for the horrific crime, saying, "She betrayed me, used me, and threw me into prison." Addressing the judge, he added, "My daughter lost her mother. She must not lose her father too." The most chilling aspect of this story is not even the horrific details of the crime, but the fact that all of it occurred before the eyes of the couple's 5-year-old daughter. Currently, the Russian grandmother is prohibited from contacting her granddaughter. The girl now lives in a facility for traumatized children and has been given a new name to prevent her from learning about her real family's story. On May 23, 2023, when the verdict was announced, Ekaterina's daughter was 6 years old. Walter Baumann was sentenced to life imprisonment. Under German law, he will be eligible for parole after 15 years. Ekaterina's ashes were placed in an urn and buried in her hometown of St. Petersburg. Moving on to the next case. Gail and her husband Rick Brink. It was a peaceful Saturday evening in November 1987 when a young pair returned home after celebrating a friend's wedding. Their residence appeared no different from any other. Peaceful, quiet, nothing seemed disturbed. But when Monday arrived, nobody had heard from them. They failed to appear at work, and phone calls were left unanswered. Alarmed, their relatives went to check on them and stepped into something they never could have anticipated. What occurred inside that house would stay unresolved for more than 2 decades. And the reality, when it eventually surfaced, stunned everyone. Ryan Wingarden was born on December 12, 1962, into a large, close family grounded in tradition, faith, and order. He was one of 8 children, Lynn, Terry, Bragg, Chia, David, Cheryl, and Gail, raised by Darasha and Wendell Wingarden. The pair established their household on firm principles. Wendell, a veteran of World War II, devoted 26 years to working at a furniture company and sang in the choir at Central Church in West Lyon for almost 40 years. The Wingardens were recognized for their wholesome family lifestyle and deep religious convictions, the type of family residents of Holland, Michigan admired. But looks can be misleading. While the family's exterior appeared perfect, tensions quietly simmered. The youngest daughter, Gail, born on April 24, 1965, was particularly close to her family. During the 1980s, she met Rick Lee Brink, a man 7 years older than her, born on February 12, 1958. Their relationship progressed rapidly and intensely. Friends recall Rick telling others from the moment he met Gail that she was the one. In early 1986, they wed, creating a future full of hope. The couple held solid jobs, remodeled their home together, and were viewed by everyone as a bright example of young love. At the same time, Ryan's life moved in a very different direction. He faced financial difficulties and barely managed by selling small quantities of marijuana. He dated Pamela Ann, born on March 3, 1965, but kept a hidden relationship with a former girlfriend, Crystal Bellin. The difference between Ryan's unstable course and Gail's secure, happy life was striking. In the fall of 1987, a disagreement sparked tension within the Wingarden family. Darasha and Wendell, along with their younger children, planned to relocate onto Rick and Gail's property. While certain siblings approved of the plan, others, including Ryan, strongly opposed it. The conflict created a divide, particularly between Ryan and Gail, one that would lead to chilling outcomes. On Saturday, November 21, 1987, Gail and Rick attended a wedding at a Holiday Inn. They came back home later that night. No one heard from them again. 2 days later, on Monday, November 23, neither appeared at work. Worried, Rick's parents went to their house. What they discovered would haunt them forever. Rick's body was found slumped over the steering wheel of his Chevrolet Blazer in the garage. He had been shot twice in the head. His mother nearly collapsed at the sight. Rick's father escorted her back to their vehicle before going back inside the house to look for Gail. In the main bedroom, he discovered her lifeless body stretched across their waterbed. Her face was covered by a pillow soaked with blood. She had been shot 3 times. Police were contacted immediately. The crime scene showed no evidence of forced entry, no struggle, and no theft. Jewelry was left untouched. Almost $500 in cash was located between the bedroom and the kitchen. The killings had been precise, deliberate, and cold. Autopsies confirmed the deaths took place between the night of November 21st and the early hours of November 22nd. Investigators questioned relatives, friends, and neighbors, yet uncovered no solid leads. There were no persons of interest. No motive, no detentions. The funeral took place soon afterward. The pastor who presided described the crime as the work of the devil. The community was deeply disturbed and media attention continued for weeks, but eventually the case went cold. As time passed, normal life continued. Grief softened into quiet. 1 year later, Ryan married Pamela. Together they had 3 children: Caleb, Elizabeth, and Benjamin. Darasha and Wendell's love story, despite the pain of losing their daughter, persisted. They marked their 50th wedding anniversary before Wendell died on July 9, 2005. He was buried with military honors at Rest Lawn Memorial Gardens, leaving behind a legacy of faith, family, and unresolved questions. But destiny was not finished with the case. In an unexpected turn, 24 years after the violent murders of 1987, a lead surfaced that would alter everything. In 2009, the Ottawa County Sheriff's Office created a cold case unit devoted to reopening unsolved crimes. By 2011, a team of detectives was assigned to the Brink case. Their goal was to re-examine a case that had long been buried beneath dust and doubt. They began by reviewing stacks of decaying records, some so delicate they had to be reconstructed with tape. Over time, they carried out more than 200 interviews, traveling across state borders to track down witnesses who had moved away. The team worked from a central belief. Time wears away silence. Guilt becomes heavier. And eventually, someone speaks. One of the earliest discoveries came from Cheryl, Gail's sister. She remembered a strange remark Ryan had once made. He had openly wondered whether he could have been capable of doing something like what happened to Rick and Gail. That unsettling comment was also recalled by one of the family's aunts. Interestingly, Ryan had been questioned back in 1987, but was never viewed as a suspect. He stated that he had been with his girlfriend Pamela on the night of the murders. At first, Pamela supported his account. But when detectives uncovered a second statement from her that contradicted the first, they called her in for questioning on January 18, 2013. Pamela was placed in a small interview room at the Ottawa County Sheriff's Department. After some reluctance, she began to talk, and her confession would finally break the silence. Pamela disclosed what she had concealed for more than 20 years. Her husband, Ryan Wingarden, had killed his sister and her husband. That November night, Ryan went to Gail and Rick's house, where another argument erupted over the family's planned move onto their property. Gail and Rick told him to leave. Ryan walked out to his car, but came back moments later, saying it would not start. Rick offered assistance, and the two drove away together. That was when Ryan shot Rick twice in the head. After killing Rick, Ryan returned to the house. He found his sister alone in the bedroom and shot her 3 times as she lay on the bed. The nightmare did not stop there. The following day, Ryan brought Pamela and her 6-month-old baby to the crime scene. Pamela was horrified when she saw Rick's body inside the vehicle. She froze in fear. Ryan pulled her into the house and forced her to look at Gail's lifeless body, removing the pillow soaked with blood from her face. Pamela ran away in panic, but did not go to the police. Overwhelmed by terror, she ran back to the car and waited. Pamela told investigators that Ryan had harbored long-standing resentment toward his sister and brother-in-law. He envied their joy, their achievements, their steady life, everything he lacked. Even so, this motive represented only part of the explanation. Pamela admitted that she had remained silent for all those years out of fear of losing her employment, her freedom, and her family. She loved Ryan and did not want to tear their household apart, but guilt had weighed on her for more than 20 years. That day, with tears streaming and her hands shaking, she finally released it. Her statement, along with fresh testimony from other witnesses, provided detectives with sufficient evidence to take action. Later that same day, Ryan Weingarten was arrested and charged with the murders of Gail and Rick Brink. Prosecutors now faced the immense challenge of proving, beyond a reasonable doubt, that Ryan had killed his own sister and brother-in-law in cold blood. The case was sent to court in Holland, Michigan, where a family's long nightmare would at last face the light of justice. In February 2013, nearly 26 years after the brutal killings of Gail and Rick Brink, probable cause hearings began in a courtroom in Holland, Michigan. Over several days, more than 50 witnesses were called to testify. Prosecutors recognized the extraordinary work carried out by detectives who had relentlessly reopened a long-dormant case and carefully pieced together a story from decades-old fragments. As witnesses took the stand, lapses in memory became evident. The passage of time had blurred details, dates, conversations, and even basic facts. The defense seized upon these inconsistencies to weaken the prosecution's case, casting doubt on the reliability of the testimony. Assistant Prosecutor Lee Fisher acknowledged the difficulty of building a case on aging recollections. Still, he remained optimistic. Not all witnesses had testified yet, and among the most anticipated was Crystal. Crystal, who had dated Ryan Weingarten for 4 years before the murders and maintained an uncertain relationship with him afterward, delivered her testimony with calm precision. She spoke clearly and confidently, but only after Ryan had been removed from the courtroom due to disruptive outbursts that interfered with the proceedings. Her testimony would reveal the darkest secret of all. Crystal described a disturbing conversation with Ryan shortly after the 1987 murders. They met at a park in northern Holland, where Ryan, emotional and distressed, confessed something horrific. During their teenage years, he had sexually assaulted his sister Gail on multiple occasions. Gail had resisted and said no, but Ryan had ignored her pleas. Furthermore, Ryan claimed that Rick had once seen him watching Gail with an inappropriate look during a family boating trip. The shame, rage, and fear of being exposed had, according to Crystal, driven Ryan to permanently silence both Gail and Rick. This revelation provided prosecutors with a powerful motive, far more sinister than jealousy alone. Ryan was not merely envious of their happiness. He was terrified that his long-concealed crimes against his sister would be revealed. Murder, to him, became the only way to protect that secret. Crystal's account aligned with earlier testimony from Pamela, Ryan's wife, who had already described his resentment toward Gail and Rick's success. Pamela once again recounted the terrifying moment when Ryan forced her to view the crime scene. Cheryl, another of Gail's sisters, testified that Ryan had acted strangely after the murders, distant and without emotion. In one phone call, he coldly remarked that Gail had lived a good life, as if attempting to minimize the tragedy. Most disturbingly, he told Cheryl that he sometimes wondered whether he might have been capable of such an act. During breaks in the courtroom, arguments circulated about how reliable the witness statements were. The defense lawyer contended that certain allegations sounded more like rumor than proof. Even so, the prosecution held its ground, basing its case on the testimony of Crystal, Pamela, and Cheryl, each independently backing the theory that Ryan's motive arose from jealousy and fear of exposure tied to an incestuous, abusive history. In the end, the judge determined that the evidence presented was adequate to advance the case to trial in the Ottawa County Circuit Court. It was a pivotal moment. Justice, delayed for so long, was finally moving forward. In response, the defense attorney announced intentions to pursue alternative theories. He suggested that the crime might have involved mistaken identity, implying that the Brinks had only recently moved into the house and that someone else could have been the intended target. It was a theory the prosecution completely dismissed. As these legal strategies unfolded, Ryan Weingarten, then 50 years old, remained incarcerated in the Ottawa County Jail, held without bond. But regardless of how long it had taken, the truth had started to emerge. And now there was no going back. In March 2014, after more than a year of legal proceedings and decades of concealed secrets, the long-anticipated trial of Ryan Weingarten began. Over the span of 3 intense weeks, more than 60 witnesses testified, including 2 of his sisters, his former girlfriend Crystal, and his wife Pamela. Their testimony played a crucial role in establishing both Ryan's motive and his guilt. Among the most critical witnesses was James, a childhood friend who later became Ryan's supervisor at a tree-trimming business. Despite terminating his employment at one point, the two stayed close. James recalled a conversation from November 24, 1987, just one day after the bodies of Rick and Gail Brink were found. Ryan, speaking cryptically, made disturbing references to the crime, implying knowledge that only the killer would possess. Another significant testimony came from Ryan's sister Lynn, who remembered her brother expressing remorse after the murders, saying he wanted to apologize to Gail because he felt he had dishonored her. This vague yet troubling remark gained new significance in light of what would surface later in the trial. Defense attorneys insisted that Ryan had an alibi and challenged the prosecution's absence of direct physical evidence. They proposed alternate explanations. Perhaps the Brinks had been targeted by a Detroit-based drug gang, or maybe they were victims of mistaken identity connected to the home's previous occupants. They even questioned whether different weapons might have been used. However, forensic pathologist Dr. Stephen Cole rejected that idea, confirming that both victims were killed with a single firearm. Dr. Cole also suggested that Rick's body may have been repositioned. His blood-soaked head had clearly rested on the steering wheel, but his body was later located in the passenger seat. To explain the bullet paths, the doctor used anatomical models and rods to illustrate the injuries in court. Pamela was called back to the witness stand. She reaffirmed that Ryan had confessed to killing his sister and brother-in-law out of jealousy and fear. The prosecution centered its case on the testimonies of Pamela, Crystal, Cheryl, and Lynn. They argued that Ryan was motivated by rage and desperation, not solely over a family disagreement, but over the looming threat that Gail might expose the dark secret he had hidden for decades. The following week, Ryan himself testified. Pamela chose not to stay in the courtroom during his appearance. Ryan was confrontational, accusing police and prosecutors of distorting his words. But then, while under oath, he delivered a startling admission. He acknowledged that he had engaged in 3 sexual encounters with his sister, starting when he was 12 and she was only 9. He claimed the acts were consensual, an assertion met with outrage by prosecutors who described it as nothing less than abuse. On March 28, 2014, the jury deliberated for only 4 hours. They returned with a unanimous verdict, guilty on 2 counts of first-degree murder. Ryan Wingarden was held accountable for the cold-blooded killings of his sister Gail and her husband Rick Brink. A sentencing hearing was set for April 21, 2014. That day, Ryan entered the courtroom defiant and without remorse. For an hour, he proclaimed his innocence, lashed out at prosecutors, criticized his own defense lawyers, and even insulted the judge. He stated that God would vindicate him. The judge was unmoved. He described Ryan as a calculating, manipulative murderer who had slaughtered 2 people in cold blood, one of them his own sister. He sentenced Ryan Wingarden to 2 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. The courtroom overflowed with emotion. Relatives of both victims cried, embraced one another, and thanked the investigative team for their relentless pursuit of justice. Cheryl, speaking through tears, said she could finally visit her sister's grave and tell her that justice had been done. One detective later referred to the case as one of the most emotional of her career. She said the team had done everything possible to make sure that 2 lives taken so unfairly were honored through justice. In 2018, Ryan Wingarden appealed his convictions to the Michigan Court of Appeals. The request was denied. He later appealed to the state Supreme Court, but that effort was also rejected. Since his arrest in January 2013, Ryan has remained incarcerated. Now in his 60s, he is expected to die in prison. Ryan's father, Wendell, passed away without ever learning the full truth. But his mother, Darasha, lived long enough to see justice served. She turned 90 in June 2021 and died 4 months later, having witnessed the resolution of the case that had haunted her family for more than 25 years. The Ryan Wingarden case stands as a dark and sobering reminder. Some secrets destroy not only lives, but entire families. Rather than confronting his past with honesty, Ryan chose a path of silence, shame, and ultimately violence. And for that, he will spend the remainder of his life in a prison cell, a consequence born from truth denied for far too long. Moving on to the next case. Case of Jalea Davis. The police officers who arrived at the scene were horrified by what they discovered. Body parts were scattered on the road, and the girl was found decapitated and missing a leg. Blood was splattered everywhere, creating a gruesome sight. But what had actually occurred? Jalea Davis was born in Colorado Springs in 1991. She had an older sister named Toby Davis. They had a close relationship, like best friends. Eventually, the family moved to Marietta, a small town of 13,000 people near the West Virginia border. After finishing school, Jalea took a job at a local store, aspiring to become an esthetician, which was her dream for the future. On Friday, November 18, 2011, 20-year-old Jalea left home around 6 p.m. to meet her friend, Kristen. They planned to get ready for a party together at Brian's house, where Jalea would spend the night afterward. The girls dressed up, applied makeup, and styled their hair beautifully. Friends picked them up, and they all went to the party and then to the pool room in the park. Although Jalea did not know the other friends very well, she enjoyed her time with Kristen. She texted her mom, Kim, updating her on their plans and saying they were having a great evening. Her last text was sent at 9:30 p.m. The party with Jalea's friends was still going strong. At 3:28 a.m., Toby received a call from Jalea, who was at the gas station. Toby was with a guy at the time and told Jalea that they were coming to pick her up. During the call, Toby heard Jalea ask Kristen to give her keys, while Kristen mumbled something in the background. Then Toby and her partner went to the gas station. 5 minutes later, Jalea called Toby again, her tone angry and annoyed. She asked Toby to meet her somewhere else. While stopped on the highway, Toby asked Jalea what was going on. Jalea replied that it was not something to discuss over the phone and insisted on explaining in person. Toby could hear Jalea arguing with Kristen, accusing her of being a bad friend. Toby realized that the two friends had argued. Since they were in a hurry, Jalea decided to change direction and go to a location about 20 minutes away. Jalea urged her older sister to hurry and yelled at Kristen, calling her terrible. Toby tried to calm her down, assuring her that they would be there soon as she and her partner ran towards them. 20 minutes later, Toby decided to call Kristen and ask what had happened to them. Before Kristen could reply, the connection was lost. Toby and her partner arrived at the designated location but could not believe their eyes. Several police cars had blocked the road. They stopped and asked the police what was going on. The police replied that there was a dead body of a girl on the road. It was an African-American woman wearing a white coat. Toby looked at her boyfriend in horror. According to the description, it was Jalea. The police did not tell Toby anything else. In a panic, she called Kim, her mother, and the rest of the family, who quickly arrived at the scene. While waiting for her family, Toby called Kristen back. She said she saw something, then hung up. Toby tried to call Kristen back, but she did not answer. Jalea's family, who had just arrived, began to press the police for information. Police confirmed that the body found on the highway was Jalea's, and that her identification had been found with her. Her car was 300 meters away from where her body was found. Jalea had been decapitated, and some of her body parts were scattered on the road. Her family could see a white sheet covering some of her remains. They were in shock, trying to understand what had happened to Jalea. They had only spoken to her on the phone 20 minutes earlier, so they were confused by how quickly this tragedy had unfolded. A truck driver was driving down the road when he noticed the gruesome scene. Body parts were strewn across the highway. He immediately called 911 at 3:48 a.m. and remained at the scene waiting for police. To prevent other vehicles from driving over the remains, he began blocking oncoming vehicles. The condition of the remains made it impossible to determine the gender of the victim. When police arrived, they secured the area and began questioning the truck driver and other passing motorists, but no one was able to provide information. The drivers said they did not see anything suspicious, nor did they touch the remains for the victim's belongings. There were no cars parked nearby, and the reason the victim abandoned the vehicle remains unclear. Jalea Davis was brutally killed. Her head was discovered in the bushes alongside the road. One of her legs was severed below the knee, and her right breast was missing. Fragments of brain were found on the nearby fence posts. The scene was horrifying. Jalea Davis was barefoot and completely topless, wearing only torn jeans. Her clothing was neatly arranged on the fence, first her bra, then her shirt, and lastly her jacket. All the items were tattered and stained with blood. It remains a mystery who placed her belongings there. A car was discovered 300 meters from her body, crashed into a fence. Unlike the horrific condition of her body, the car appeared relatively intact. It was empty and running, with the doors locked and the headlights on, suggesting the driver had left in a hurry. The front passenger window was open, and there were noticeable dents in the car. Blood was found on the license plate, in the trunk on the passenger side, and on the taillights. The police deemed her death suspicious and launched an investigation. Toby kept calling Kristen, who was the last person to see Jalea and had been with her before the incident, in hopes of getting an explanation. Kristen mentioned she had witnessed something, but the calls kept getting disconnected. After the police conducted their investigation, the family members visited the scene and took photographs. They found a boot print in the gravel. The following day, the police aimed to interview everyone who had been with Jalea that night, including Kristen and her friends, but could not locate Kristen. She also did not answer her phone. When police went to Kristen's house, her father responded, stating that she did not wish to speak to anyone and that they would be hiring a lawyer. 12 hours after Jalea Davis's death, Kristen indeed hired a lawyer. She became the primary focus of the investigation, and her refusal to cooperate shocked Jalea's family. They suspected she was hiding something. Otherwise, she would not be avoiding everyone, ignoring the police and her family, or hiring a lawyer so quickly. They also knew that Kristen was the granddaughter of the sheriff and had a history of altercations at a bar where she was known for her temper, but her grandfather always covered for her. 3 days later, Kristen met with the police alongside her lawyer. She explained that she arrived home at 7 p.m. to prepare for the party. Afterward, she and her friends drove to Brian's house in Jalea's car, arriving around 10 p.m. The party had several unfamiliar faces, and people were drinking and socializing. Feeling bored, Kristen, Jalea, and 2 male friends went to pick up another friend, Katie, and get some more drinks. The 5 of them then returned to the party and continued drinking. Kristen and Katie's friends tried to stop Jalea from drinking more, but they were unsuccessful. Jalea ended up consuming about 15 shots. Initially, her friends did not notice how drunk she was. She did not fall and seemed to walk fine. They went to play pool, leaving Jalea at Brian's house. During the game, they noticed that Jalea was very drunk. The alcohol had taken a toll on her, causing her to act inappropriately. She flirted and danced with Katie's ex-boyfriend, making everyone uncomfortable. As the situation became more tense, Kristen decided it was time to leave. They left the pool hall around 3 a.m. Freddie was driving. Kristen was in the front passenger seat, and Jalea and Katie were in the back. They headed home, but did not go inside. While the friends discussed their plans, Jalea was on the phone. After the call, she realized she could not find her bracelet and became upset, blaming Kristen for losing it. Kristen had actually carefully removed the bracelet in the pool hall and put it in her bag, but this only made Jalea angrier. Jalea got out of the car and called her sister to pick her up. Kristen then overheard Jalea calling her sister to change the meeting location. Jalea then moved her car and said she would wait for her sister, assuring everyone that she would stay in the car and not go anywhere. The friends then went to McDonald's. This was the last time they saw Jalea, and what happened to her after that is unknown. The police questioned several friends, including Kristen, who agreed to testify about the night of the incident. However, the police found many inconsistencies in their statements. Katie shared a similar story, but added more details. After Jalea was dropped off, she went to Kristen's house. Katie heard Kristen talking on the phone with Toby. After that, they all went home. Katie met her ex-boyfriend Chris, and they spent the night together. The next morning, Katie learned that Jalea had died. She stated that she did not blame Jalea for flirting with her boyfriend because Jalea was drunk. Chris supported her claim, saying they were together that night, and he mentioned that he foolishly flirted with Jalea, who was bothering him. He noted that she was very drunk and struggling to stand, but he did not witness any arguments between the girls that night. However, he also mentioned that Katie told him about a fight between Kristen and Jalea after they left the billiard room. Freddie, who drove the girls to the party, is the son of a police officer. He said he arrived at the party before the girls at 11 p.m., but Kristen claimed they were already there at 10 p.m. It is unclear who is telling the truth. They might have just misremembered the time. Freddie mentioned seeing a woman arguing with a white man in the billiard room, but he did not know him. After the party, Freddie admitted he had been drinking a lot and drove them home. On the way, there was a disagreement about a bracelet. He stated they left Jalea in the car while they went to McDonald's. After that, he took Kristen home and then went to his own place. He was unsure how Jalea ended up on the highway. The police found the friends' testimonies confusing, particularly Freddie's, who insisted they had not given Jalea a ride. However, in the last call made when Jalea was on the highway, Kristen's voice was heard, suggesting they were together, possibly without Freddie or that he was too drunk to recall what happened. As time went on without any arrests, many people started to think the police were not conducting an investigation. They dismissed the incident as an accident. Rumors spread throughout the city, suggesting that Kristen and Freddie played a role in Julia's death. Many people believe that her death did not appear to be a simple car accident. Her car showed only minor damage: a few dents, a slightly broken windshield, and a shattered front passenger window. However, there was no significant damage to explain how her body ended up 300 meters away from the vehicle. It seemed more plausible that she had exited the car and had been struck by someone. Additionally, it was puzzling why all of her clothes above the waist were removed and neatly hung on a nearby fence. To make matters more confusing, police later discovered a removable hood from Julia's jacket in the bushes behind the fence. How it got there and why the police did not catch it earlier remains unclear. It was also odd that her body parts were found scattered across 2 lanes of traffic. Due to the extent of her injuries, her body had to be cremated. In 2012, Amber Stafford approached the police to report what she claimed to have seen on the night Julia died. She said she met Julia at a pool hall and observed a fight in the parking lot involving Julia, 2 black men, and a white woman. According to Amber, after the confrontation, Julia drove away while the men followed her in another car. Julia attempted to escape from them, leading to a chase. Ultimately, the other car collided with Julia's vehicle, and Amber witnessed her getting out before the attack occurred. Amber's account appears to contradict that of Julia's friends and sister. Amber was offered a polygraph test, but did not pass. During questioning, Amber confessed that she fabricated her story but did not provide a reason for it. As a result, she received a 6-month prison sentence and a $500 fine. In March 2013, the results of Julia's autopsy were finally made public. Toxicology tests revealed no illegal substances, but the alcohol level in her blood was twice the legal limit. The Wood County Sheriff's Department concluded that Julia's death was accidental. After her friends left, Julia did not wait for her sister, who was about to arrive. Instead, she started the car and drove away. Since she was drunk, she lost control of the vehicle. Traveling at a high speed of about 110 kilometers per hour, her car skidded to the right and crashed into the guardrail. Because she was not wearing a seatbelt, her body was thrown to the right and hit the windshield when the airbag deployed. She was ejected through the right front door window while the car continued to move. As she struck the guardrail pillars, she bounced back toward the car, causing her clothes to fly off. She flipped over the car, hitting the roof and trunk, which had blood on them, before being thrown away from the vehicle. A car may have been driving down the road at night and in the darkness failed to notice a body, running over it and dragging the remains across the road, leaving behind many fragments. This scenario seems implausible. Julia's family did not accept it. They believed their daughter's body could not have traveled such a distance. Even if she had been struck by the car, she would not have landed on the hood or trunk. The roof showed no dents that would have resulted from a body hitting it at impact. The police also confirmed that there were no blood, hair, or fibers from her clothing on the pieces of the broken passenger door. No glass was found in Julia's hair or head, so her family does not think she collided with broken glass on the door before being thrown out the window. There was no significant damage to the fence that the police reported the car had crashed into. However, this detail does not explain how the victim's clothes were neatly hung on the fence. If she had accidentally ended up there, her belongings would have been out of order, with her underwear on top. Instead, the shirt and underwear appeared to be intentionally torn. It is also puzzling why the car doors were locked. Typically, when the airbag deploys in this model, the doors unlock automatically, so someone must have closed them. A member of Julia's family expressed surprise that physical evidence was left at the scene after the police investigation. Clothing, including underwear, a t-shirt, and a jacket, were still hanging on the fence, and no one had collected them for evidence or conducted DNA testing. In addition, the hood of Julia's jacket, which had blood on it, was left in the bushes. An earring belonging to Julia was found 5 meters from her body, also left on the road. Police did not search for fingerprints or DNA on any of this evidence. Julia's car was towed away by police and parked outside without being properly inspected. Another strange detail was that Julia's favorite keychain, decorated with J-shaped gemstones, a gift from her sister Toby, was missing. Julia always wore it on her keychain. It was not found at the scene and was later discovered that Kristen had it. Kristen claimed that Jalea had given it to her, but no one believed Kristen. Jalea was very careful with her belongings, especially her jewelry, and even argued with Kristen over a bracelet. It would have been absurd for her to give such an expensive keychain. Toby also recalled that Jalea had asked for her keys in a phone call and had the keychain attached to the same set of keys. Kristen's attorney eventually returned the keychain to Jalea's family. The individuals in the car that night were never considered suspicious or questioned. Their phones were not collected for testing because Kristen, Katie, and Freddie provided alibis, stating that they were at McDonald's when Jalea died. Surveillance camera footage from McDonald's shows a car similar to Freddie's arriving at 3:32 a.m. Freddie picked up his order at the drive-thru, but it is unclear who else was in the car. McDonald's employees mentioned that the timestamp on the records does not accurately reflect reality, although it is unclear exactly how much of a discrepancy there is. Since Jalea called Toby while they were on the freeway at 3:33 a.m., Kristen argued it is possible that they were still on the freeway at that time. It is also possible that the time Freddie's car was at McDonald's was accurate and Kristen was not in Freddie's car. Despite this apparent inconsistency, the police did not verify the exact time they arrived at McDonald's and accepted this testimony, removing all suspicion from all three. Jalea's family received the vehicle and carried out their own inspection. They found a significant amount of blood underneath the car. A car hit her and dragged her along the road, which is why there was blood left under the vehicle. The blood found on the road supports this account. The airbag designed to protect the driver deployed, but the one for the passenger did not activate. There was no DNA from Jalea found, suggesting she did not come into contact with her airbag. It was discovered that the passenger airbag was faulty and did not function in the car. Additionally, a drop of blood belonging to someone else was found, but its source is currently unknown. Jalea's family believes she was the victim of a crime that night. They suspect she was struck by the same car, and after the impact, her head hit a fence post, leading to her death. The car injured her severely, resulting in her head and leg being torn apart. Jalea's family is working hard to seek justice for her, but so far the case is still closed. Moving on to the next case. Kaylee Anita Mandotti. Today we are traveling to San Antonio, Texas, a city close to the Mexican border that is notable for its remarkable cultural diversity and blending of traditions. This border position plays an important role, providing a sense of home for many Mexicans. The name San Antonio itself comes from Mexico's national language, Spanish, and translates to Saint Anthony, which suits the city well. One of San Antonio's highlights is Trinity University's College of Arts and Sciences, especially the Murchison Tower. Rising 166 feet high, it was once the tallest building in the city. One day, a young man entered the university campus. He went to a women's dormitory on the second floor, located a particular room, and forced his way inside by breaking the door handle, causing destruction within. Consumed by intense rage, he threw clothes across the room, smashed furniture, and ripped apart books and notebooks on the desk. His anger was out of control, and by the time security responded to the noise, he was sitting on the bed crying, holding a spilled soda. The young man was arrested and taken to the police station. The damage done to the room and the university was estimated at $650. The person taken into custody was 22-year-old Mark Howerton. Recently, he had lost his cherished girlfriend, Kaylee, and was having difficulty dealing with the loss. He went to her room and could not control his emotions. During his arrest, he cried nonstop, repeatedly shouting Kaylee's name. 4 months before this incident, Mark Howerton had been charged in connection with the death of his girlfriend and Trinity University cheerleader, Kaylee Mandotti. This case is filled with rumors, unanswered questions, and a large amount of information from law enforcement sources. But let's begin at the start. Kaylee Anita Mandotti was born on August 26, 1998, in Webster to Tilak Mandotti and Allison Steele. The family was financially comfortable. Allison was a scientist, and Tilak worked as an international executive director at MGM Resorts. After her parents divorced, Allison remarried NASA engineer Lawrence Butelin, who lived in Houston when Kaylee was 9. Despite her parents' separation, Kaylee kept a close bond with her father, staying in regular contact with him. Her stepfather also loved Kaylee deeply and became a second father figure to her. Kaylee was not only a thankful and loving daughter and granddaughter, but also an outstanding student, teammate, sister, and friend whose contagious laughter and kind spirit could brighten any space. At school, Kaylee performed exceptionally well academically and took part in numerous extracurricular activities. She enjoyed horseback riding, played the piano, and even acted in theater. Kaylee was a Girl Scout, ran around the Clear Lake neighborhood with friends, and went hiking with her parents. In 2016, she graduated with honors from Clear Creek High School in League City, Texas. Kaylee adored animals and happily volunteered with a group called Animal Therapy. She was always eager to discover new and unexplored paths, dreamed of trying extreme sports, and constantly sought exciting experiences. At 19, the slender, dark-haired Kaylee was already a sophomore at Trinity University in San Antonio, where she studied communications. She was popular, had many friends, and led the football team's cheerleading squad. Her lively and glowing beauty drew many admirers. One day, during a football game where she was cheering for the Trinity team, she met 22-year-old Mark Howerton. The tall, energetic athlete and professional baseball player did not capture Kaylee's attention at first, as she was infatuated with Jet and ignored everyone else. But Mark was taken with her instantly, drawn in by her large dark eyes and the charisma that distinguished her from the rest of the cheer squad. Their initial meeting went poorly, and so did the second. Still, Mark persisted, and by September 2017, they officially began dating. From the outset, friends and acquaintances viewed them as an incompatible match, as both were highly emotional and quick to anger. Their relationship lacked compromise and was marked early on by turbulent arguments and confrontations. The young, passionate couple was intensely jealous and argued frequently. Friends who witnessed their relationship stated that Kaylee often had bruises on her arms and legs. A close friend also recounted an incident that deeply frightened her. Kaylee once asked her to retrieve her phone from Mark because she was too afraid to do it herself. The situation escalated to the point where Mark became aggressive, brandishing a gun and making violent threats. Kaylee knew about her boyfriend's jealousy and temper, but she continually reassured her friends and asked them not to spread word of their loud arguments, admitting she was not entirely blameless either. However, around 1 a.m. on September 24, 2017, Kaylee's roommates could not tolerate it any longer and called the police. They heard loud noises coming from Kaylee's room along with a man shouting and threatening violence. The responding officer found Mark alone in the room. Kaylee declined to press charges, saying nothing had happened and that it was merely a lover's dispute. But her friends believed Mark was using controlled substances, which led to uncontrollable bursts of rage. He had once threatened to throw Kaylee off a balcony. Her friends reported that incident to the police as well. Their relationship resembled the ocean. During storms, the waves were violent, but in calm conditions, they were blissfully in love. On October 29th, Mark and Kaylee attended the Malaluna Music Festival in San Antonio. It is one of the largest music festivals centered on gothic, modern industrial, and dark wave music, drawing more than 10,000 people each year. Malaluna is a gathering place for partygoers and those seeking anonymity, as it is easy to blend into the crowd and disappear within it. Mark and Kaylee spent the evening enjoying themselves and partying with friends. However, the unexpected appearance of Kaylee's ex once again pushed Mark to the brink. They had a serious argument and left the festival early. That was the last time their friends saw them together that night. 6 hours later, deep into the night, Mark's black Mercedes arrived at a hospital. He rushed out of the car, frantically waving and calling for assistance. Medical staff found a semi-nude girl unconscious in the front seat. The vehicle was in disarray. Kaylee's clothes were strewn about, and she was slumped forward like a lifeless doll. Kaylee was placed on a stretcher and taken to the emergency room. Mark told hospital staff that they had consumed illegal substances before attending the festival. This information helped doctors treat her for a possible overdose. She was then transferred to another medical facility in Kyle, Texas, where a nurse trained in intimate assault cases examined her and found additional bruising on her arms, legs, and ear. A forensic examination determined that blunt force trauma to the face and head caused her death, indicating Kaylee had been the victim of a fatal assault. As a result, police launched an investigation to identify the person responsible for Kaylee Mandotti's death. Mark was the main suspect because he was the last individual seen with her that night, yet there was no definitive evidence directly tying him to the crime. Still, Mark drew suspicion onto himself. With each subsequent police interview, he he changed his version of events, which caught investigators' attention. Surveillance footage showed him and Kaylee in locations Mark had not mentioned. Additionally, discussions with Kaylee's friends and family revealed his pattern of aggressive behavior toward her. One of her sisters even stated she was afraid of him. Police uncovered alleged incidents of violence between the couple, including Mark slamming Kaylee's head against a car window and destroying her dorm room at Trinity. When Kaylee's parents learned about Mark's previous assaults on her at the university, they were devastated. The mother of the slain Trinity University cheerleader, Kaylee Mandotti, filed a lawsuit against the school, claiming it failed to take appropriate measures to protect her daughter from her boyfriend's attacks, who is accused of causing her death in a jealous rage. The lawsuit was filed in the Behar County District Court on behalf of the mother, Allison Steele. Her daughter's former boyfriend, Mark Howerton, was also listed as a defendant. The lawsuit alleges that Howerton assaulted the 19-year-old from League City and was ultimately responsible for her death. According to the filing, Trinity staff, its administration, and campus police were aware of Mark Howerton's unstable behavior throughout the relationship. It claims that he threatened to break Kaylee Mandotti's face or cause serious bodily injury. Despite this, the university allegedly took no action in the weeks before her death to protect the young woman. A spokesperson for Trinity University declined to comment on the allegations in the lawsuit, citing the ongoing legal proceedings. Trinity University's failure to respond to repeated reports of harassment, abuse, intimidation, domestic violence, and gender discrimination led to the tragic death of the sophomore. Allison Steele's statement also asserted that Kaylee Mandotti's death could have been prevented if Trinity had intervened as it should have. According to the lawsuit, the university ignored its own policies regarding the investigation and response to potential cases of relationship violence and harassment. After an incident in the dorm room, Mark was issued a criminal trespass warning, barring him from campus for 1 year, yet he repeatedly violated it. Additionally, investigators uncovered numerous accounts of Mark's violent behavior toward Kaylee during their relationship. For example, one of her sisters recalled that he threatened to throw her off a balcony during an argument, while another said he also threatened to shoot some of her ex-boyfriend's brothers with his gun. Based on all of these statements, police were able to obtain a warrant for his arrest, after which he turned himself in. In February 2018, following the discovery of Kaylee's room in disarray at the university, Mark Howerton surrendered to authorities. He was charged with multiple offenses, including criminal mischief, intimate violence, and abduction. However, he pleaded not guilty to all charges. The first trial related to Kaylee Mandotti's death began in December 2019. Prosecutors argued that Mark, known for his volatile temper, fatally assaulted Kaylee Mandotti in a fit of rage. They also alleged that he transported her for nearly 6 hours before bringing her to the hospital. In response, Mark's defense team argued that Kaylee's death could have resulted from multiple causes. Autopsy findings revealed banned substances in her system, suggesting the possibility of a spike in blood pressure or head trauma occurring during intimate activity. Kaylee's mother testified that the injuries and bruises on her daughter's body were extreme, comparable to falling from an airplane. Indeed, the injuries were severe. Photographs shown to the Behar County jury depicted the Trinity University sophomore from San Antonio, Texas, barely recognizable, covered in bruises from head to toe, with red marks and scratches. Both of her eyelids were swollen and bruised. The only areas without visible injury were her back and the backs of her legs. Diagrams and photographs taken by Dr. Susanna Dana, the forensic pathologist who performed Kaylee Mandotti's autopsy, revealed a subdural hematoma, a buildup of blood commonly linked to traumatic brain injury, on the right side of her brain. Kaylee's father, Tilak Mandotti, after viewing 2 photographs showing his daughter in the ICU in a vegetative state, surrounded by numerous tubes with her face barely visible, spoke about her in a shaking voice as tears filled his eyes. "That's my daughter," he said, "my only child." Dr. Susanna Dana stated that upon examining Mandotti's head, she discovered a dent in her skull. Most of the medical testimony concentrated on the head and facial injuries Mandotti sustained, which Dana characterized as severe. These injuries involved trauma to the eyes. Both eyelids were bruised, with the left eyelid so swollen that it could not completely close. There were significant bruises on both the left and right sides of the jaw, bruising inside the mouth above the teeth on the gums, as well as on the lips and cheeks. There were hemorrhages in both eyes, she stated, displaying photographs of the inner lining of the eyelids. She concluded that the cause of Mandati's death was blunt force trauma to the head and face. Dr. William Anderson reviewed the autopsy findings and disagreed with the conclusion that Kaylee Mandati had been assaulted. "We do not see any fractures in the eye socket. There were no fractures in the nose either. No fractures were present on the face. This," he said, indicated there was no frontal assault. Instead, Anderson proposed that the young woman's injuries were more consistent with a fall and extensive medical treatment. Defense attorney John Hunter offered an alternative explanation, arguing that the prosecution lacked enough evidence to determine what truly happened to Kaylee Mandati that night, and that proving Mark Howerton's involvement was therefore impossible. Throughout the trial, he repeatedly referenced Kaylee Mandati's drug use, at one point mentioning her treatment for substance dependence at a hospital. Jason Wallach, a professor at the University of the Sciences in Philadelphia, testified that Kaylee Mandati had a high concentration of MDMA, commonly known as ecstasy or Molly, in her bloodstream after her boyfriend brought her to the hospital on the night of October 29, 2017. The presence of these substances suggested that a person could suffer a minor head injury and that the effects of MDMA could make it fatal. John Hunter, expanding on these findings, stated that the drug affects individuals differently. Many people experience increased body temperature or an imbalance of electrolytes when using the substance. According to him, these conditions could result in loss of consciousness. The jury then began hearing testimony. That day, jurors viewed video footage and listened to an audio recording from police interviews in which Mark Howerton told investigators that he and Kaylee had argued and engaged in intimate activity in the car before she lost consciousness, and that they enjoyed rough intimacy. He said he would choke her during the act because she liked it. Mark Howerton maintained that everything was consensual, but where the bruises came from and when they occurred remained unanswered. This question was never fully resolved during the December 2019 trial regarding Kaylee's death. Allison strongly believed that Mark Howerton would be held accountable for her daughter's death. However, following the 2019 trial, the family felt deeply disheartened. Although Mark had been charged with causing a death, he continued to assert his innocence. The defense claimed that the injuries sustained by the victim were caused during resuscitation attempts by medical personnel. As a result, the jury was unable to reach a unanimous decision, leading to a mistrial. The case was heard in the 144th District Court of the state, overseen by Judge Raymond Angelini. When the jury failed to reach a verdict, the case was declared a mistrial and dismissed. As a result, in the first trial, Howerton was effectively acquitted of the charges, leaving the case unresolved. Behar County District Attorney Joe Gonzalez, who had overseen the case from the outset, expressed disappointment with the outcome and stated that he would re-examine the case. During this period, Kaylee Mandati's parents chose to begin their own investigation. They gathered all evidence and autopsy reports from the police and focused their attention on a small, round, pinpoint bruise located near Kaylee's ear. Allison and Lawrence speculated that Mark could have struck her head against the car window, causing her to hit the door lock and sustain bruises. They hoped this would help establish his culpability. Identifying a similar Mercedes, the same car Mark had driven that night, Lawrence took photographs, posing in ways they believed mirrored the circumstances under which Kaylee could have injured her head. With the assistance of the Texas Rangers, they obtained records, 3 written affidavits under oath, included in the warrant for Howerton's arrest on charges of criminal acts, aggravated intimate assault, and criminal mischief, addressing many questions about Mandati's case and providing a detailed timeline of events before and after her death. The slideshow outlined key moments in chronological order, leading to Kaylee's death and the evidence discovered during the investigation. Specifically, the timeline provided by authorities illuminated Mark Howerton's alleged falsehoods to the Rangers and the evidence that resulted in his arrest. Throughout the trial, prosecutors depicted Howerton as a manipulative and controlling boyfriend who constantly called Kaylee and confiscated her phone so she could not communicate with friends. At one point, 2 weeks prior to her death, Howerton shoved Mandati against a brick wall and, in a fit of rage, trashed her dorm room. Soon after, Kaylee informed Mark that she needed space, according to text messages reviewed by the jury. Howerton began sending her dozens of messages, at one point threatening to take his own life. She pleaded with him not to do so. In total, he called her approximately 200 times that evening. Later, They attended a festival and argued about Kaylee's ex-boyfriend, who was present as well. Mark Howerton then took Kaylee Mandotti from the festival, placed her in the car, and drove to a deserted parking lot near the Whataburger headquarters, close to US 281 and Sunset Road. GPS and camera records show the couple remained in the parking lot for over an hour. Prosecutors suggested it was there that Mark Howerton attacked Kaylee Mandotti and beat her to death. Kaylee Mandotti's family expressed gratitude to the Texas Rangers for their diligent efforts in securing the appropriate criminal charges against Kaylee's alleged assailant. The retrial for Mark Howerton began in June 2023 after delays caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. During the trial, the prosecution considered introducing a video recorded by Kaylee Mandotti's parents, showing her injuries in the hospital, but ultimately withdrew it due to potential complications and new disputes. Evidence gathered with the assistance of the Texas Rangers was also considered. Mark Howerton was found guilty of aggravated assault causing bodily harm, resulting in a lethal outcome. The court sentenced him to 20 years in prison, with a $10,000 fine and restitution to Kaylee Mandotti's family. Additionally, he was prohibited from contacting more than 20 individuals involved in the case. Mark, now over 30 years old, is serving his sentence in the Willacy County Jail with eligibility for parole in 2033. The conviction provided some closure for Kaylee's family, though they stated the sentence felt inadequate given their loss. In the second trial, Mark Howerton faced charges, including aggravated assault causing serious bodily harm in addition to the original manslaughter charge from the first trial. Unlike the first trial, the prosecution expanded the charges to include aggravated assault and criminally negligent homicide. The legal strategy was modified to present a more comprehensive case against Mark Howerton. However, dissatisfied with the outcome, Kaylee's family and prosecutors insisted on pursuing a retrial. Kaylee Mandotti's tragic story highlighted the devastating impact of violence on a young life and her grieving family's pursuit of justice. This complex case is the subject of the article, The Final Hours of Kaylee Mandotti, reported by 48 Hours correspondent Peter Van Sant. Kaylee Mandotti's story serves as a stark reminder of the consequences of violence against young people with promising futures. Despite the conviction, Kaylee's family stated that the verdict does not deliver justice for their beloved daughter. In 2019, Allison Steele, Kaylee Mandotti's mother, successfully lobbied the Texas legislature to expand the missing persons alert system in Texas. She then founded the nonprofit organization Kaylee's Calling, aiming to consolidate missing persons alert systems. Steele also established a nonprofit dedicated to providing public information about the Clear Alert, an emergency broadcasting alert in Texas for individuals aged 18 to 64. In addition to these efforts, in 2021, she filed a civil lawsuit against Trinity University, alleging negligence in protecting her daughter. Steele claimed that none of Kaylee's guardians had been informed that Mark Howerton had trashed her dorm room. She also stated that the university took no action against him, allegedly allowing him continued access to her daughter and making her vulnerable to manipulation. It remains unclear whether the evidence collected by Allison and Lawrence was presented at Mark Howerton's trial in 2023. Despite being acquitted of the charge of ending a life, he was found guilty of aggravated assault causing bodily harm. Prosecutors noted that the family expressed satisfaction with the verdict, as they had endured prolonged suffering and felt relief that the legal proceedings had concluded, allowing them to begin the healing process. Losing a child is an agonizing ordeal, and sadly, it was a heart-wrenching journey that Kaylee Mandotti's parents had to endure. Allison Steele said they are still completely devastated by the loss of Kaylee and urged those of faith to pray for her family, friends, and for justice in this matter. Moving on to the next case. The case of Nicole Vander Hayden. Nicole met Douglas in January 2015. At that time, she had already experienced a marriage, 2 children, and a divorce. After they began dating, Nicole and Douglas started living together, and within a few months, Nicole discovered she was pregnant. Both Douglas and Nicole were excited about the prospect of raising children together. By May 2016, Nicole, Douglas, and their 3 children, the youngest of whom was 6 months old, were living in Green Bay, Wisconsin. On Friday night, May 20th, the couple decided to attend a concert to take a break and enjoy some time off. They had arranged for a babysitter to look after the children while they were at the concert. A photo was taken of Nicole happily chatting with Douglas and his friends. As the concert neared its end, Nicole and her friends decided to continue the night by going to another bar. Douglas said he would join them at the bar after finishing a conversation with a friend. Surveillance footage showed Nicole enjoying herself at the bar while Douglas had not yet arrived to join her. After some time, Nicole became upset and sent him a text message accusing him of being unfaithful. At around 12:30 a.m., she tried calling Douglas, but he did not answer. Feeling frustrated, Nicole asked a friend to call Douglas from their phone, and he answered. Nicole was angered that Douglas had ignored her calls. She got up and walked toward the exit, despite her friends trying to stop her, but they could not prevent her from leaving. Irritated, Nicole ran out into the street, turned the corner of the building, and vanished into the dark night. When Douglas and his friends realized she was gone, they began searching for her, driving around the nearby streets, but could not locate her. They eventually returned to the bar, had a few more drinks, and then went home. At approximately 5:30 a.m., Douglas called the police to report that his girlfriend, Nicole Vanderheiden, was missing. He provided a description of her appearance. That same day, a local farmer contacted the police after discovering the body of a woman in tall grass near his farm in Brown County. At first, he thought it might be an animal, but on closer inspection, he noticed her blonde hair. The woman was found naked except for socks and a pink bracelet on her wrist. There was significant blood in the area, and she had severe facial injuries. When the police examined the body, they confirmed it matched Douglas' description, identifying the deceased as Nicole. The location where her body was found was only 3 miles from Nicole's family home. Douglas was called in for questioning. He stated that he and a friend had left a bar that night around 2:30 a.m., and his friend had dropped him off at approximately 3 a.m. After entering the house, Douglas went to sleep and woke around 5:30 a.m. He realized Nicole had not returned home and immediately called the police to report her missing. Douglas maintained his innocence, denying any involvement in Nicole's disappearance or death. He was shocked when police informed him that Nicole's body had been found at the farm. Simultaneously, police obtained a search warrant for Douglas' home. During the search, they found blood on the garage floor and in the back seat of their car. Additionally, a pair of Air Jordan sneakers was discovered in the garage, matching the shoe prints found at the scene of Nicole's death. Blood stains were also present on the soles of the sneakers. In the early morning hours of May 21st, a patrol officer found several of Nicole's belongings along a freeway approximately 2 miles from where her body had been discovered. These items included her purse, cell phone, and clothing, and were located near a building across the street from her home. At this location, police also discovered numerous bloodstains, several locks of blonde hair, and a phone charger. Police collected more than 70 pieces of evidence and sent them for forensic analysis. They worked to reconstruct the events of the tragic night that led to Nicole Vanderheiden's death. Initially, police believed a confrontation had occurred between Douglas and Nicole as she returned home that night, resulting in the crime taking place outside. They concluded that Nicole had been killed about 120 feet from her front door. As a result, Douglas was arrested and taken into custody. However, after 18 days, forensic analysis revealed that the blood found in the garage, car, and near the neighbor's house did not belong to Nicole. In fact, it was not human blood at all. Furthermore, the stains on his sneakers were not blood. On the night of the incident, Douglas wore a fitness tracker on his wrist that recorded his movements. This data corroborated his statement to the police. He drove home that night, checked on his children, and then went to bed. Consequently, Douglas was cleared of all suspicion and released from custody. The investigation team sought to understand why Nicole had come so close to her home, particularly since her body was found only 3 miles away. They reviewed surveillance footage from a bridge in Green Bay and hypothesized that if Nicole had been walking, she would have crossed that bridge. However, they found no useful clues. A key finding was that blood samples taken from Nicole's clothing, garage, car, and the neighbor's yard did not match her DNA. Instead, they belonged to an unidentified man. This created a major obstacle for forensic experts, who were unable to definitively identify him. A breakthrough came in August, nearly 3 months after the traumatic incident, when the forensic lab informed police that they had successfully isolated DNA material from one of Nicole's socks. The DNA sample was comprehensive and reliable. When the results were entered into the national database, they revealed the name George Stephen Birch, a man who had lived in Virginia. George had moved to Green Bay, Wisconsin, on March 1, 2016, seeking a fresh start. A longtime friend gave him a place to stay and helped him find a job. The friend also loaned George a red Chevrolet Blazer, which was later involved in an accident and caught fire. A few weeks after Nicole Vanderheiden's death, police ran a background check on George in the local police database and found a report of a car accident involving him. This report led them to his address. Police then went to George's neighborhood and saw him on his porch. Police confiscated his cell phone. The team working on Nicole's case requested a copy of the data from George's phone. By analyzing cell tower records, local Wi-Fi networks, and GPS data, police determined that on the night of Nicole's disappearance, George had been at a bar just half a mile from where Nicole was staying with friends. GPS data showed that at 2:30 a.m., he left the bar and drove to Nicole's house, remaining there for about an hour before going to the farmhouse where Nicole's body was eventually discovered. He then went to the location where her clothes were found. By 4:22 a.m., George had returned to his home. 4 months after Nicole's death, George was arrested and charged with first-degree intentional homicide. On February 19th, he went to trial. His defense team attempted to blame Nicole's boyfriend, Douglas. However, prosecutors maintained that Douglas had no involvement in her death. They presented evidence from his health monitor, showing that he had been asleep during the time Nicole was brutally attacked near the farm. On the third day of the trial, Douglas testified, revealing that he and Nicole had planned to get married and had discussed it on the night of the tragic event. He said they had been enjoying the concert and had been drinking. Although Nicole was not typically a heavy drinker, she had consumed more than usual that night. When Nicole decided to go to another bar with friends, Douglas and his friends chose to stay at the concert venue to continue partying, including drinking and drug use. Douglas admitted that he had spent some time with Nicole at the bar, during which he had received angry messages from her accusing him of being unfaithful. Nicole had called him several times until her phone battery died. Douglas expressed his confusion and concern about Nicole's anger toward him that night and adamantly denied any connection to her disappearance and subsequent death. Shortly after Douglas testified in court, George's defense attorney presented a key piece of evidence: text messages that Douglas had sent to his mother just 10 days before the incident. In one message, Douglas stated, "I'm actually thinking about telling Nicole and the kids that they have to move out." He later explained that the messages were not intended to be taken seriously. Additionally, George's attorney presented testimony from Douglas's former girlfriends, who described him as a jealous and controlling person who often treated them poorly. One ex-girlfriend even claimed that he had installed a tracking device on her phone to monitor her movements on the night of Nicole's disappearance. After Nicole's tragic death, she had confronted Douglas, accusing him not only of being unfaithful but also cruel. Douglas continued to deny all allegations, maintaining that he had never been unfaithful to Nicole, nor had he ever raised a hand against her. In court, the nanny who had been at Douglas and Nicole's home the night they attended the concert testified. She recalled asking Douglas where Nicole was when he returned. Douglas replied that he did not know. She had hit her head and simply wanted to walk home. On the 8th day of the trial, George Birch presented his account of the events of that night. He began by describing himself as a hard worker and a caring family man. On the evening of May 20th, he was at a bar where he met Nicole. George claimed that they had flirted and that he felt Nicole was receptive to his advances. He described their conversation as friendly, lasting until the bar closed at around 2:30 a.m. He then drove her home, parking near the driveway to continue their conversation for a few more minutes. George explained that they had consensual sex in his car with Nicole participating. He said that he could not sit comfortably in the back seat because of his size, so he stood by the open back door while Nicole remained inside. After their intimate moment, he suddenly felt an attack from behind that knocked him unconscious. When he regained consciousness, he was lying on the ground and saw Douglas nearby, pointing a gun at him. There was a lot of blood around, and George said he was unsure if Nicole was still alive at that time. When Douglas arrived at the farm, he was armed and carried Nicole's body into the tall grass. George later described a sudden confrontation with Douglas. He claimed to have used force to push Douglas to the ground. He then said he was able to get away from Douglas and return to his car. George subsequently fled the scene and threw Nicole's belongings out of the car window. The next day, he went fishing with friends, including a photo taken on May 21st. Notably, he did not report the incident to the police or tell his friends what had happened that night. The prosecutor argued that George's testimony was highly suspect. Nicole would not have willingly agreed to satisfy a man she barely knew, especially by exposing herself out of the car window at her own home. The prosecutor contended that George intended to have sex with Nicole in his car, but she refused. When she tried to leave, George became angry. He allegedly grabbed a phone charger and used it to strangle her, then stripped her down to her socks. He then dumped her body and returned home, hoping to avoid being caught. The prosecutor argued that George's story was full of contradictions. After the attack, the disposal of the body, and his escape, George went fishing with friends the next day, seemingly enjoying himself. Additionally, the prosecutor presented Nicole's soiled clothes to the court. If George's testimony were correct, her clothes would have been clean, as he claimed she had removed them in his car. However, in reality, Nicole's clothes were covered in blood and dirt, indicating she had resisted while wearing them on the ground. Throughout the trial, 2 women were present, closely watching George and listening to everything he said. These women were identified as the sister and fiancé of Joey White, who had died in 1997. The suspect in White's death had been George Birch, White's neighbor. Although George was acquitted and released at the time, White's fiancé and sister continued to believe he was responsible for the death of their loved one. After 19 days of testimony and jury deliberations, the judge announced the verdict. George Birch was found guilty of attempted murder. Although the judge believed George deserved the death penalty, state law mandated a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. Douglas was relieved, as he had feared facing new charges in Nicole's death. Without the evidence from the fitness bracelet, he might still have faced prison time. George Birch was sentenced to life in prison, ensuring that he would never harm anyone again. Nicole's children are now being raised by their biological fathers. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed exploring these intriguing cold cases with me. If you found the video fascinating, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to Cold Case Mystique for more deep dives into cold case investigations. Your support helps me bring you more compelling content. Leave a comment below with your thoughts or any cases you'd like me to cover next. See you in the next video. And remember, the search for truth never stops.